There has always been something deep within the human heart that longs to leave a mark upon the world. Across every generation, men and women have raised monuments, built cities, and carved their names into stone, hoping that time itself would remember them. Kingdoms have risen from the dust because people believed that together they could accomplish anything, and countless rulers have dreamed of creating works so magnificent that future ages would stand in wonder before them. Yet history quietly asks a question that every generation must answer for itself. Can human greatness ever replace humility before God? Can the hands that shape the earth also shape their own destiny without the one who created them? Long ago, upon a vast plain where the horizon seemed endless and the skies stretched beyond imagination, an entire people believed they had discovered the answer. They would build a city unlike any other, and at its center they would raise a tower so extraordinary that it would seem to touch the heavens themselves. The world was still young after the great flood that had changed the course of history. The waters had long since withdrawn, and the descendants of Noah spread across the land, carrying with them the memory of both judgment and mercy. Families grew into tribes, and tribes became a great multitude of people. They shared one language and one way of speaking, and because every voice could understand another, they possessed a unity that made even the greatest tasks appear possible. There were no barriers of speech to divide neighbors from friends or craftsmen from builders. Their words flowed together as naturally as rivers, and their common understanding gave them confidence that nothing could stand against them. As they journeyed together, they came to a broad and fertile region known as the land of Shinar. Wide plains stretched before them, rich with opportunity and open enough to contain a city of immense size. The people looked upon that land and saw not only a place to live, but a place to establish a legacy that would outlast their own lives. There was excitement among them, for they believed they stood at the beginning of a new age. They had survived the flood through the mercy of God, but instead of reflecting upon His faithfulness, many began to place their trust in their own abilities. The strength of their unity slowly became the foundation of their pride. Someone spoke of building a city, and the idea spread quickly through the crowds. Others imagined walls that would stand against every enemy and streets that would be filled with prosperity. Then another vision emerged, greater than all the rest. At the heart of the city there would be a tower of astonishing height, rising upward until it seemed to challenge the heavens themselves. The people encouraged one another with enthusiasm, saying that they would make a great name for themselves and ensure that they would never be scattered across the earth. What began as cooperation gradually became ambition, and ambition slowly transformed into self-reliance. The builders turned to their work with determination. Since suitable stone was scarce upon the plain, they fashioned bricks from clay and baked them in great kilns that burned day and night. Thick bitumen served as mortar, binding each layer together. Smoke drifted across the landscape as countless laborers shaped materials with patient hands. Caravans brought supplies, craftsmen measured foundations, and overseers organized the endless activity. Day after day, the city grew larger, and the tower climbed higher into the sky. Children watched in amazement. Elders spoke proudly of what their descendants would inherit, and travelers who crossed the plains could see the rising structure from far away. The people believed that their work would protect them from uncertainty. They feared being separated and forgotten, so they placed their hope in walls of brick and towers of human design. Yet the deeper their foundations reached into the earth, the further their hearts drifted from humility. The memory of God's command to fill the earth and spread across it faded beneath the noise of construction. Instead of trusting His guidance, they trusted their own plans. Instead of seeking His glory, they sought their own. The scriptures tell us that the Lord looked upon the city and the tower that the children of men were building. Nothing that happened upon the earth was hidden from His sight. He saw their skill, their cooperation, and their determination, but He also saw the pride growing quietly within them. Their unity was becoming a tool for rebellion rather than a blessing for righteousness. They had begun to believe that together they could build a future apart from their Creator. Then, in a moment no one expected, everything changed. The workers arrived to continue their labor, carrying bricks and tools as they had done countless times before. Foremen called out instructions, merchants negotiated prices, and families spoke to one another as the city awakened. But suddenly confusion spread among them like a wind no eye could see. Familiar words no longer carried familiar meaning. A simple instruction was answered with puzzled silence. Friends stared at one another with uncertainty. Brothers discovered that they could no longer understand the voices they had heard since childhood. At first, they tried harder to communicate. They repeated their words, raised their voices, and used gestures to explain their thoughts. Yet the confusion only grew. Craftsmen could not work with their helpers. Builders could not understand their leaders. Merchants could not bargain with their customers. The unity that had once seemed unbreakable vanished almost instantly. Fear replaced confidence, and frustration replaced pride. Across the great construction site, work came to a standstill. Bricks lay abandoned where they had fallen. Fires continued to burn in the kilns, but fewer and fewer hands remained to tend them. The streets that had once echoed with cooperation filled instead with uncertainty. Families gathered together with those they could still understand, while strangers became separated by words that no longer held the same meaning. The unfinished tower stood over them, not as a monument to greatness, but as a reminder of human limitation. Little by little, groups departed from the city. Some traveled toward distant mountains, others crossed rivers and deserts, and many followed roads that disappeared beyond the horizon. Tribes formed, nations emerged, and different languages spread across the earth. The place became known as Babel because there the speech of mankind was confused, and from there the people were scattered across the world. Perhaps those who looked back from the distant hills could still see the outline of the unfinished tower standing against the sky. They may have remembered the excitement of its first foundations and the confidence they once possessed. They may have realized that all the labor of thousands could not accomplish what pride desired. The walls remained incomplete, and the city that was meant to secure their future became a testimony carried through the generations. Yet the story of Babel is not simply about a tower of bricks and mortar. It is a story about the human heart. It reminds us that intelligence, talent, and cooperation are gifts, but they become dangerous when they lead us to believe that we no longer need God. The greatest weakness of the builders was not their strength, but their belief that their strength was enough. History is filled with monuments that once appeared eternal. Empires have risen and fallen. Palaces have become ruins. Mighty cities have disappeared beneath sand and stone. Towers that seemed impossible to destroy have surrendered to time. But the wisdom of God remains unchanged. Human glory fades like the grass of the field, while truth endures from generation to generation. There is also a quieter lesson hidden within this ancient account. The scattering of the nations was not the end of God's purpose for humanity. Though people would speak different languages and travel different paths, the Creator had not forgotten them. His plans would continue through the generations, unfolding in ways no builder could have imagined. The same God who humbled the proud would continue to guide history toward his greater design. Many people still spend their lives building towers of another kind. Some seek wealth, others seek power, and many desire recognition that will survive long after they are gone. There is nothing wrong with honest work or noble achievements, but when ambition replaces humility, the heart can slowly drift from the one who gives every blessing. Babel reminds us that greatness is not measured by how high we can build, but by how faithfully we can walk. The unfinished tower standing upon the plain of Shinar became one of history's most enduring symbols. It teaches that pride can divide what once was united, that human plans cannot overcome divine wisdom, and that the strongest foundations are not made of brick, but of reverence and obedience. Kingdoms will rise and kingdoms will fall. Cities will be built and forgotten. Towers will one day return to dust. But the quiet wisdom of God remains forever, calling every generation away from pride and toward humility, away from self-glory and toward faith, reminding us that the highest place a person can ever reach is not found at the top of a monument built by human hands, but in a life that walks faithfully with its Creator.